Hello and welcome to 3D modeling video number 71. In this video I will teach you how we can use the bump slot to add more detail to our objects and to bake that detail into a normal map. So in this example here I am building a tiling floor texture. So here is the basic polygon I have under it, just one polygon. And here is my high polygon geometry set to turbo smooth when it's rendered. So basically I want a texture for the floor and I want it to be tiling, and I have these 4 pieces here. And the reason it's 4 is so that there's some variety. I could just have one piece here, but I want to change the texture around a little bit so that I can add scratches and dirt in different spots and just have it be a factor of 4 instead of just 1. And then I can use other techniques to hide the tiling nature. I can use decals, and I could use props and environmental pieces to hide the tiling effect. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select the plane on the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and bake that. So I've already set up, I've already added the normals map element, and I've set the size to 1024 by 1024, and I'll just click on render, and I also set render to files only. So I'll just go ahead and click on render, and this is what I did previously, just testing it out. So it's going to begin rendering from the top. Since I have a lot of detail and I'm using 1024 by 1024, it's going to take a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and return once it finishes rendering. So here's the finished result. So let's go ahead and take a look at our normal map. I'll go ahead and close this for now, and I'm just going to go ahead and leave this where it is. I'll go ahead and clone a copy of this off to the side and right click and collapse to. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new material. I'll just go ahead and go over here, and I'll go under the bump slot, click on that, normal bump. Under normal, I'll go ahead and click here, bitmap, and this is what I did in my previous video, and this is what I've got just now. Let's go ahead and apply, and here I'll go ahead and click and hold and select the second option, show hardware map in viewport, and I'll click on it. And right now by default the bump slot is at 30%. You can change the value here to change the strength of whatever map you have here. So if you change it to 500, you see it gets a very strong effect, maybe a little bit too strong. So let's just go ahead and use 100. So here is the normal map that we just got. And so it's a pretty decent looking normal map because the low polygon mesh is so simple. We don't have any irregularities that we have to deal with, any skewed parts or any cage issues. So here we go, we have a fully functional tiling normal map. And let's go ahead and test the tiling. I'll go ahead and right click here and set it to grid points. Let's press G to activate the grid, and then I will actually I won't use the grid, I'll just go ahead and use the vertex. There we go. I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of duplicate around here. And I'll go ahead and attach them. And go ahead and merge all the weld all the vertices. So here we go. So we've got a nice tiling texture that's ready to go, ready to be used in the game engine. And there's no problems with the tiling. It's tiling just fine. So now let's actually start talking about the bump slot and how we can actually use it to add more details. So let's say I wanted to create a thread plate texture in the middle, and I wanted to bake that into my normal map. I want to have thread plates here. So of course the first option you would think is just use geometry, but several things. Now, first of all, that will require extra time, and second of all, it can be very intense on your performance. If you have a very small detail that you just tile all throughout your geometry, that's going to add thousands or maybe millions of extra polygons that don't really need to be there. So what's the solution? Well, we can use the bump slot. So basically, this is the default gray material that I use, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click and hold and drag it over here, and it used to be called thread plate. So whenever you drag a material, it has the same name, and it's recommended to change it. It was called thread plate because I was experimenting earlier, but whenever you drag over, it's going to go ahead and copy the name, and we don't want that. We want to give it a unique name to avoid problems. So I'll just go ahead and call this thread plate, and this is the same material, same specular level and glossiness settings. And so the bump slot right here, it can accept two different types of images. Number one is just, regular bitmaps like JPEG, PNG, and any other image format, and that's for the bump. So the bump slot can accept bump maps and normal maps, and the difference is simple. Bump maps are just black and white maps which just have the black in the image shows you where the areas will be recessed, where there will be dents, and the white areas are where there will be valleys. And I'll show you that later, but the bump slot can also accept normal maps. So you just have to go ahead and, instead of clicking bitmap, which what you would usually do, you'll just go ahead and select normal bump instead. And then you would select the normal map in the normal slot right here. And I'm going to go ahead and select what I created in my previous video, 3D modeling tutorial number 70, which is this tiling thread plate normal map. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and select these four parts that are part of the high poly, and I'll go ahead and apply it. And I'll go ahead and click here so I can actually preview the tiling. And this is way too large, so I'll just go ahead, let's try 6 and 6. I don't want to make it too small. If I make it too small, it's not going to be captured in the normal map. It's going to be very pixelated and not enough resolution. The detail that you will add here depends on the resolution of your normal map. If you have a very low resolution, don't bother adding all this detail because it will not be properly captured, because there's not enough resolution, not enough pixels to properly capture all this detail. So set it to something reasonable. And also for design decisions as well. You don't want to make your details too small, otherwise the player will get lost with all the details, and that can really hinder the flow of the game. So I'll just go ahead and use 6, 6, and for angle here I'll change the W to 45. So I've created a new material, and I've gone ahead and applied a normal bump in the bump slot, and I'll go ahead and set it to 100, and I can also deactivate the view. If you don't want the view to be visible, you can just go ahead and turn it off, but the bump slot will still be active. The normal map will still be active when we render. So now I'll go ahead and render it out again, and I'll get back to you once I finish. Okay, so the rendering is finished. As you can see now, there is a very different result here. We now have thread plating in the middle of all of the pieces. So let's go ahead and test out the normal map. I'll just go ahead and go here and replace it. Choose a different normal map this time. I've gone ahead and cleared it, and I'll go ahead and select this one. And let's go ahead and test it out. So there we go. Now we have a new normal map with now a thread plate detail in the middle, which makes it look, in my opinion, a lot nicer, a lot more detailed, a lot more impressive. And so here's the thing: if I had made the tiling more than 6, like 12 or 20, it would have been way too small, and there would not have been enough resolution, enough pixels to properly capture all the details. You can see when I zoom in, at this distance it looks fine. Still looks alright. Well, when you zoom in, you can start noticing the pixelation. So if it was even more tiled, it would be very pixelated and hard to make out. So you don't want to make things too detailed for the purposes of, texture resolution limitations as well as design decisions. You want your environment, you want your objects to kind of guide the player and not to overwhelm the player with unnecessary detail. So that's that. So that is how you can use the thread plating. Now you have a practical use for the previous tutorial. However, let's say we also want to have a bump map as well. You can insert a bump map right here. So if you apply a normal bump, you can go ahead and put a normal texture right here and a bump map right here. However, you can also apply a bump map to a different material. So I'll go ahead and click and drag it over here, and I'll call this metal scratches. And this time I'll go ahead and choose, actually I'll go ahead and keep it at 30. This time I'll go ahead and choose, instead of going to a normal bump, I'll go ahead and right click and clear. If you want to add just a bump texture, click on here, and instead of going to normal bump, go directly to bitmap. Now I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my metal texture. So here's the folder where I keep some of my metal textures. I'll go ahead and go into another folder called scratches. Now this folder has some textures that have a good scratches on them, and most of these, or all of these, are photo reference, which means they were taken with a camera and it's not hand drawn, it's just a photograph. So I can use any of these textures as a normal bump. However, if you choose a color texture, the color will not actually be taken into account. It will be reduced to black and white at render time. So whichever one you click on, the color does not matter. What matters is the brightness of each pixel. So let's say that I choose, let's go with, how about this one right here? And before that, I'll need to go ahead and quickly apply a UV map. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and select all of these. Yeah, I'll go ahead and select these. I went ahead and disabled the turbo smooth for these little details because they're already detailed enough. So right now there's a turbo smooth modifier with all of these, so I'm going to go ahead and just delete that for now. I'll go ahead and apply a UVW map modifier. This is a very simple modifier for very quickly and sloppily applying a UVW map. And it's useful for these kind of situations. It's not useful for a high quality, high fidelity, professional object, but for a quick normal map and for quickly adding a texture, it does the trick. It gets the job done. And I'll just go ahead and select the box, for example. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to preview what the texture will look like, so I'll just go ahead and apply it. And I'll click here to show standard map in viewport. Alright, so here is this texture applied to this object, and then I can change it to box, perhaps go into the gizmo, perhaps make it larger like so, and here it is. But I think I should choose a different texture. I want to choose some more scratches. Let me go ahead and try this one. Alright, and then I can go ahead and maybe increase the tiling. Okay, we've got some problem areas like this one, but let's see. So the thing is, because it's tiling, it kind of does this. So I can try to maybe angle it. I'm gonna go ahead and keep it for now. We can fix that later. So I just went ahead and increased the tiling to 3 and 3. So this texture with scratches on it is just in the bump slot, just as a bitmap. But that will act as a bump map. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go and apply Turbo Smooth to this. And I'm going to go ahead and bake a new normal map using this as a bump texture. And I'll come back once I finish. Okay, so the baking is finished, and I just set up the three different polygons with 3 different textures applied, just to show you the difference and what we did. So in this first one, it's just a high polygon geometry with no normal map and no bump map added. In the second one, I went ahead and added a thread plate, normal map, tiled, rotated to the middle, and we now have a nice detail in the middle of all these panels. In the third one, I went ahead and added a bump map. I went ahead and added this texture and went ahead and tiled it by 3, and I applied that to the high polygon on the outside as well as the inside, and I got this detailed normal map as a result. And also you can also add it in your normal bump map. You can go ahead and add the normal map right here. So in this case, in the normal map slot, I went ahead and added this, and in the bump map slot I went ahead and added the bump map. So the problem right now is that there's some obvious tiling happening here. You can obviously see where that's happening, and that is affecting the normal map. So you see how there's an obvious tile, an edge here, and if you look at the normal map, you can actually see it added to the normal maps. So in the future, I will show you a way that you can kind of remove this ugly tiling effect. It's not too bad here, but the biggest problem here right now is that the strength of the normal map and the strength of the bump map might be a little bit too strong, and it's kind of ruining the effect because it's just too heavy all over the place. So if you want to go ahead and use the bump map, I recommend that you decrease the strength. Here you can change it to like 0.25 or choose a value that works well for you. And if you are adding a bump map here, instead of the default 30, you can set it to 10 or 8. Something low like that should give you a better result. You can see it's a little bit too heavy here, but it is a great introduction for you guys to start experimenting with bump maps. So I can use a variety of other bump maps. So this is what we have right now. I can go ahead and choose this one, and that will give me these really fine scratches. And so you can just quickly bake small details into a normal map simply by adding a texture to the bump slot of the high polygon geometry. It might also be a good idea to give your low polygon geometry and your high polygon geometry different materials, and that way you can give your high polygon geometry a bump map. And then I can use this scratch texture to give me this result. Although if I use this scratch texture, I might actually need to set the bump to -8, because right now the scratches are white, which means that the bump will look more like it's coming towards you. They'll look more like hills and valleys instead of dents and scratches, instead of a recess. But if you set it to -8, then the brightness will go inwards instead of outwards. And let me go ahead and show you real quick. If I go ahead and apply this, I'll go ahead and turn that off. I'll go ahead and set it to this. Alright, so let me go ahead and change it to something high like 100. So you can see that the scratches look more like veins, like they're popping out. However, if I set it to, negative 100, witness, observe the change in lighting. So you can see that now it's going inside. Now it looks like real scratches. So let me try a more obvious texture. Like, let's see. Let's go ahead and try this one. It's going to take a little bit of time to apply the new bump map. So in this texture, you see we have this, I guess, paint peeling off or some kind of scratches. And let's say I want the white parts to be, dents and indentations. If I just have it be, like 30, notice that it's positive. But if I set it to negative 30, now it looks like it's an actual damage, like some paint or some metal was scratched and removed here. So the bump map is a very good way for adding lots of these kinds of small scratches, dents, and destruction without actually having to sculpt it. It can take a while to sculpt, and it's not really necessary to sculpt it. You can just apply a quick texture like so, and it's going to give you a nice effect on your baked normal map. You just have to remember to set the value to something low. So instead of negative 30, let's go with negative 8, and that'll give you a much more subtle, better looking result. Not as messy, not as noisy. So I highly encourage you to go ahead and download some textures. You can go ahead and go to www.cgtextures.com. That's a great website to get some free textures and experiment with different textures to see what kind of result you get. So with this texture, I get this kind of result. And I can bake all of this along with the high polygon into my low poly. And that's going to add a lot of detail. So thank you for watching and take care.